Bachman's Basement is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back to Bachman's Basement, where we dig into the deep worlds created by Stephen King, not just monsters and supernatural horror, but the collapse of people, society, morality, and everything we think holds civilization together. Today, we're stepping into one of King's biggest and most ambitious works, The Stand. Not just in page count, but in scope. This apocalypse horror, religious epic, road novel, political collapse story, pandemic nightmare, and dark fantasy all rolled into one. Originally published in 1978, later restored to its complete uncut version in 1990, The Stand has become one of King's defining works. It's the story of what happens after humanity destroys itself and what rises from the ashes afterwards. The horror here isn't just Captain Trips, it's the silence afterward. Empty highways, dead radios, cities with no power, entire towns filled with corpses, and somewhere out there in the dark, something ancient starts calling to the survivors. For this series, we're breaking The Stand into 3 acts because honestly, trying to cover this beast in one episode would be absolutely insane. I'm your host, Chris Padden, and as always, I'm joined by my great co-host and good friend, Christopher Clausen. How you doing, buddy? What you been up to?
Doing well, as usual. Just been busy with work and family and all. We saw a couple movies this week in the theater. Did get a chance to go see that Mandalorian and Grogu film. That movie is surprisingly good, and I hear it's not doing too well. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm not going to talk about it too much, just for anyone out there that still has yet to see it. I felt really good about the experience. It felt like kind of back to basics Star Wars, but telling a story that's, a side story. It's not a saga story. So, but like the locations and the practical effects and these types of things, there's a lot of that. Familiar yet new characters, obviously Mandalorian and Grogu we're familiar with, but then you got some new characters, or from if you've kept up with the TV show, which I actually haven't watched the newest season of Mandalorian. So this going in, I didn't feel like I was missing something watching it without having watched the newest season. So that would be my sort of spoiler-free response to having seen it. It's great. I would recommend it to anyone. And then also, just to I've seen quite a few things this week, so I wanted to kind of jump on them. We went and saw a second movie the following day. It's a horror movie called Passenger. I think Cassie had high hopes from the trailer, which the trailer really kind of sells this. And the trailer really does sell what is great about that movie, which is the jump scares. There's a couple scenes in that movie that are absolutely perfect sort of horror delivery. When you get to, if you watch this movie, it's not greatly written. It's not even that well acted, but there's this one scene. It's probably one of my favorites that I've ever seen in a horror movie, where this woman, one of the main characters, is walking through the parking lot. Essentially, it's like a boyfriend, girlfriend that have given up this sort of like living in the city, and now they're trading it for van life, and they're traveling around the country. Anyway, they parked their van in a parking lot near like a Planet Fitness or something, and they're inside working out. He's still working out. She leaves. She's like, I'll be out in the van, and she's walking through the parking lot, and it's nighttime. There's nobody in the parking lot. and she's just walking towards the van, and it's like the sound of somebody walking behind her. It's the sound design of the movie is so well done, where you hear the steps behind her and she stops, and then the steps that she's hearing stop and she turns around, and it's like it cuts to like first person camera, and it looks back to where she was walking from, and there's nothing there, and then the camera pans around and her van is further away than it was before. So it's just creepy in that way. It just builds tension really well. Overall, the movie's not that good, but I would definitely recommend it when it comes to streaming. And then to wrap it up with what I've been watching and stuff this week, I did finally get around to starting and watching Euphoria, and I'm on season 2, episode 4. So I've made my way almost halfway through the series. So I'm enjoying that a lot too. How about yourself?
You're in such a juxtaposition when you hit the latest season of Euphoria. It's a whole different show. Like,
I am excited. I'm really enjoying the show. Like, it is such a wild, like, just over the top, sort of like kind of back to back watching The Boys and then going right into Euphoria. They're both like shocking, sort of like no holds barred sort of storytelling, which I really enjoy. I like that.
yeah, the new Euphoria is so weird. At some point, it's almost like someone trying to do a Quentin Tarantino movie and making it really porny.
Okay.
And yes, I did say porny.
Porny.
That would be the best way to describe prostitution and OnlyFans accounts in the way that they are described in most of that show, without giving too many spoilers of the plot. But it is a wild ride. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's one of those things where let's see how it wraps up, and then I will give a big description of what the current season of Euphoria, which we have been watching on the week-to-week basis. So there's one episode left.
I have a feeling I'll be caught up to you guys by the next time we join up for next week's episode. So
yeah, so I've been watching that. The wife has mostly been kind of torment watching, like doesn't really like it. I don't know, like it's kind of just not the same show. Like it's a very different show. And granted, it was like a 3 or 4 year hiatus of that show, and a lot of cast members died.
Right.
It's kind of a weird. It's fast forwarded from high school to a new plot point, and
I'm curious to see. I don't even know. Like, don't ruin it for me, because I'm, like I said, I'm about halfway through season 2 right now, so I don't even know what's gonna happen in season 2. But season 1 was phenomenal. Like, I really enjoyed the arcs of all these characters, and without saying anything for anyone out there that hasn't watched this show, if you like spectacular, sex and violence and drug use, I mean, the show is really over the top in that way. It does not hold its punches, when it comes to the way that it presents these things, these high school kids, just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wild ride. I kind of wish that we would have watched the couple of seasons before this current season beforehand again, because it's been so honestly, it's been so long, and it's almost like when they reboot Skins, which I think they could actually do with the show going forward if they wanted to continue to make Euphoria. Like change the cast up completely. But yeah, it's a wild watch. I think that like there's going to be a lot of people that really like it and a lot of people that really hate it, because I think if you really enjoyed the first 2 seasons and
there's a
kind of the way the story was built, it's almost a whole nother show.
I was going to say, it's kind of like, with the loss of some of these actors and these characters in part, that's a thing. And then also the change of the fact that these are no longer high school students. Now they're young adults in doing their lives, I assume, in different places. Maybe not, but we'll see. Don't ruin it for me. I'm gonna watch it. So.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where I don't search anything about it because it has been heavily either criticized or given praise depending on how you feel about OnlyFans and nudity in TV. It is a weird.
Personally, I'm not ashamed of the human body, so like I don't let that bother me, and it's like it's fine. Like it doesn't,
This would be like considered to me like back in the day when you had Skinamax.
Sure.
Some of the stuff in this show is heavier than the softcore porn that they would show at Skinamax on like
there's
3 in the morning.
So much sex and nudity through even the first season and a half. I mean, more full nudity than I'm used to seeing in a television show. But honestly, like I said, that just comes with the territory of what the show is.
This thing is dialed up to 11, like almost in a way of being exploitive would be the best way to put it. But yeah, the story itself, the what's going on in it almost has, like I said, more of a Tarantino vibe. I would throw it more to a crime drama like Breaking Bad.
Okay.
So there's a heavy shift in the tone of the current season. But like I said, if you don't want to be spoiled, do not look up anything about the show at all because there is warring factions on whether the season is good and not good, and you're going to see a bazillion spoilers of each episodes in specific scenes that happen. It is one of those things. So anyone out there listening to this that's like, hey, I might check that show out. Try to check it out as blindly as possible. I know that's very hard
it'll be a show that the first
we live in
1 to 2 episodes you'll know immediately if it's a show you want to watch or not, because it does not wind up, it doesn't like slowly take you into this world. It immediately like just drops you into the middle of this, and these young people's lives are just so dramatic and just fraught with all sorts of problems that are exceptionally difficult. So it's almost like the first 2 episodes I was like, man, this is kind of depressing, and then like I kept watching, I'm like, actually this is just really good entertainment. So
let's see, what else have I been watching? I've been watching Married with Children.
Yes.
I've been sick most of the week. Probably people can hear that in my voice, so apologies if I sound like shit. Married with Children, I made it to season 6, beginning of season 7. There's a crazy episode of Married with Children that has Anthrax, the band, on it. And the idea of this episode is that Bud Bundy wins a thing that MTV actually did, where Anthrax would come to your house and play a house party and break all your shit, apparently. And they do it in the episode, but typical Married with Children style, they get snowed in. So it's just Bud, Kelly, Buck the dog, and the neighbor Marcy watching Anthrax play at this house.
That's great. I don't remember that episode.
It's a weird episode.
I don't think I watched.
Season 6 is really weird, and season 6 is really weird in general of Married with Children. I didn't know why this occurred until I had to do some research on it. But the first like 6 or 7 episodes is Peggy is pregnant, because Katie Siegel was pregnant in real life, who plays Peggy, and famously was in Sons of Anarchy and a bunch of other shows. She's been in a ton of shit. Phenomenal actress and great as Peg Bundy. But she had like this is going to get really depressing. She lost a child during pregnancy, during the filming of the show. So they changed like mid-season after that happened. They switched the tone of the show to a dream sequence that Al had. So the first like 8 episodes of the season don't count.
So it's like because she lost the child in real life, she's no longer
like, we don't
in real
continue. But yeah, and it wasn't that. It was just like, we don't want to continue if that's very insensitive. We continue with her having a child on the show, and
and it's
whatever.
Like going to really make it difficult for her to perform.
Right. And then she's just gone from like 4 or 5 episodes in that season, which makes sense. But I thought that was like it writing wise, that has to be like a huge obstacle, right? Like I'm sure everyone worked on the show, was excited for her, and that's why they wrote it in the storyline to keep her on the show. And then just tie it in and make a new character or whatever. Give Al another thing that he has to not overcome well, because Al never does anything well. He has the Bundy curse. But it was really interesting. I never knew that. I remember in season 7, they bring in like a nephew because they're getting in like sitcom land of like, we need to introduce some new characters or something.
We've run out of storytelling between these people. Like we're just treading the same ground.
Right. So that was the idea of season 6, and they got flipped on its head. And I think they did a good job of writing their way out of it in the way they did, which is kind of unique. So anyways, anyone out there ever watched season 6 of Married with Children, like, what the hell? Like, that's why, which was kind of wild. And then for my B horror flick, I watched this movie called Video Violence, which was recommended to me, and it's a SOV horror flick. And have you ever seen Video Violence, Chris? Gotta ask the question, right?
No, I have not even heard of it.
Okay, so the idea is a husband and wife. I think this came out in 88 or 89. A husband and wife open a video store in a new town and come to find out that the locals only rent horror flicks and occasional XXX movies. And they make their own snuff films, and bad things ensue. And that's the entire plot. It's very, very low budget. It's a weird movie. I wouldn't say it's good. But it's something. It's one of the movies of all time. It's
one of them.
It's something to check out.
Okay.
Depth of
I
this
mean,
flick, because it's kind of hard to talk about. It's filmed more like each of these snuff films are their own individual thing. So without breaking it down into its own podcast, it's hard to talk about, but it is it's a weird movie. Definitely one to watch with someone else, and then you can talk about it and have conversations with. It's also one of those ones, much like the B horror movie I threw out on the last episode, where not for everybody. So
yes, yeah, I can totally, just from what you described, I'm drawn in to that mini synopsis. That seems like it might be up my alley. Immediately, my brain went to that Nicolas Cage flick, Snuff, where he's in the seedy underbelly, and I forget, he's like a cop or something. But I know that's not at all what this is. But that's where my mind went when you're like, they're making real snuff films. I'm like, that movie came to mind.
It's a weird flick. It is it's in IMDb's top 1,000 B flicks, which is the list I've been going through and picking out things I haven't seen.
Nice.
Unless someone sends me something. So if listeners out there have something I haven't talked about, feel free to message me, Christopher.R.Patton on Facebook or Instagram. And I'll try to talk about it on the show unless it's something I've seen. If it's something I've seen, I don't really want to rewatch unless it's something I really love. But yeah, so watch that. And then as far as what I've been playing, which has not been a lot this week, but last weekend, you and I put some work in on the new Forza Horizon.
Yeah, that was
Forza
fun.
Horizon 6.
I'm definitely into it. I enjoy it a lot more as a game to play while we chat, and that's one of those, like you said, it's one of those, like, you can just sit back, not think, and just sort of cruise around and do the races and explore this Japan location. It's a great game. I'm very entertained so far.
It looks beautiful. It's super fun. You can make it as serious or not serious as you want it to be. And you and I played it very not serious.
Definitely. Well, I'm happy we found that 69 Charger, and now I have my General Lee, because that was something
I went with a NASCAR livery on mine. There's been people, so your General Lee has the sponsored by Forza 6 on top of it.
Right.
But some people have snuck in the Rebel flag in that game and have gotten banned online. So for those out there that really want a General Lee, if I was doing the livery, I would do exactly what they have done with the toy cars and things nowadays, which is just don't put the Rebel flag on top of it and just do, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to see the top of the car in that game anyways, unless you flip upside down, which would be bad. That would be bad. That means you're doing really bad at the race. My favorite cars are the typical cars I always drive, like GTIs, Ford Focus RSs, like hot hatches. I think are super fun.
You don't like the Impreza, but I really like the Subaru Impreza. I've been enjoying that car a lot.
Yeah, Subaru's okay. I've gotten several. You get several Subarus through this game. Yeah, I'm more of like an Evo guy when it comes to that car specifically. If I'm looking more for like the 80s, my perfect car, my favorite car in Forza 4 and Forza 5, and the one that I use the most for the cross country races is the I think it's the Audi A4 Quattro Rally. And you can get the Marlboro from the 80s, the Marlboro red livery. A lot of people redo that. That was like kind of my go-to for those. Those are super fun. But yeah, you and I have not been min-maxing our cars like a lot of people have been doing online. I think, I get a cool car and I'm like, yeah, I've been slow playing the game. You can, obviously, there's ways to grind out this game and get a bazillion credits and own every car as quickly as possible. But for me, it's like, I'm going to jump in and chill on this game for a couple hours and have a good time. I have done most of the drift challenges, which have been super fun. And you can do most of those, pretty easily with one of the first cars they give you, depending on your tune. So, yeah, there's a lot of people that are really into Forza, which I expect. I have not played that much with a racing wheel on Forza. It's really weird going from like F1 with the racing wheel to Forza. It's so kind of cartoony. The wheel doesn't really seem necessary, and I have to move all the shit off my desk and hook everything up. And it'd be cool if I had like a separate setup for that, but I am not in that world yet. So
I've always thought, like back in the day, I had that force feedback racing wheel with the foot pedals, like the clutch system, everything, like it was great. And I always think, like, I see those people that get the whole, like, they have a giant whatever room where their gaming room, and they'll get those full setups that's got like the hydraulics on it. So when you sit into essentially like a car setup, you're into a bucket seat and you got the whole thing, and you get the feel of the turns and stuff. That would be sick. That would make that so immersive to play any racing game that way.
I mean, it would be super cool, but I don't know that Forza 6 is I've played with the racing wheel a bit, but I don't know that the experience is that
much Forza is not necessarily. Maybe the premier Forza games that are on the tracks, but
not. I've enjoyed digging around in that game. I think there's some really funny Easter eggs in that game. Like there's the little mascots you hit, and if you turn into first person and you hit one of those really slow, they're all smiley faces, and when you hit them, they turn into frowny faces, which I think is fucking hilarious.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
So for those out there listening that haven't done that, do that. It's really fun.
After you left the game, I played a little bit more that night, and I found this jump, and I just kept doing it over and over, trying to get the most, get 3 stars in like the feet traveled. And then I beat the only other person on my challenger list. I doubt it. I didn't even get close to the world record or anything, but I beat one of my my Xbox friends and like traveling, like, I don't know, it's like 1,500 feet or something. 1,600 feet.
So those are weird because like at the first four, like I think it was like Forza 3 or Forza Horizon 3 or 4, I would do all of those, but it's almost worth waiting and doing them all at the end when you got like all the good shit to do.
Right. I'm like, how are people traveling like 5,000 feet? It's because they have really like you said, tuned up vehicles and just for that.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird thing. And there's some like XP boards and stuff that are on top of houses, and you need to hit a specific speed to launch at a specific angle. And sometimes you might want a YouTube video to do if you're collecting everything, which I've done in most of these games. I don't know if I did it in 5, but I definitely did it in 3 and 4. Pretty sure I 100%ed 5. But yeah, I don't know that that's what I want. I'm sure I will get there because I'll continue to play it as they release new cars, which they do on the constant.
There's no rush. The game just came out. There's no rush to finish it.
There's so many people that have already made Legend Island on that game, which is carried like you've blown through all of the content. And they're like, yeah, now I can enjoy the game. And I'm like, okay, that's
how you enjoy the game, I guess. Yeah, to each their own.
I am very much I like cruising around. I like driving cars that aren't necessarily the meta, like, oh, I like that car. Try that for a little bit. If the difficulty's too hard, I'll drop it down. I have played some on Unbeatable, which is really, really can be difficult. There is a notorious CPU named Bowie Knife 99 who's been fucking people out there on the track, who has became a meme now in Forza 6, which is pretty great, where people are now wrecking the CPU every time they see that drivatar because they know what could happen to them at the end of a race, which is it's kind of great. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but it has became like this meme. But yeah, game's hella fun, man. If you like racing games, and arcadey modes, definitely. I mean, you can pretty much make the game drive your car for you. I don't think the skill gap is that crazy, but if you want to ride around, look at like in one of your favorite cars, do some drifting, play some races with your friends, have good chats while doing it. I think it's the perfect game for that. I think it's a great co-op friend chat game because even a friend that's not into racing can be like, well, I got my car in real life. Like you can get like a Tesla S or a Ford Focus or whatever the hell you drive for the most part. It's kind of chill with your friends, and it's not and even if you don't have their car, you can borrow their car if they're on a different race than you are. It's just made very, very well. I don't know, man. Playground games always kill the Horizon games.
These are Xbox or Microsoft exclusive, aren't they? They're not on PlayStation.
They're Microsoft exclusives. PlayStation's big is still Gran Turismo, which Gran Turismo is its own beast. I love Gran Turismo 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I've put many, 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 many hours in it. I think I sent you and Griff a video for the patent report that I'm working on it. I was working on an episode for Gran Turismo 2 where I was gold licensing every one of the licenses and then going to play through the entire game. But that is a big video. So I think I sent you guys some of that gold licensing, some of those events and stuff. So those are different, right? Like and at some point, with iRacing and games like F1 and stuff like that, I don't know how PlayStation plans to handle like Project Cars there's very good sim games. The same thing with like Forza, which I think is why Forza has split. Like you still have a simulation Forza game.
And then you get the Horizon games every other year, every couple.
They've really been focusing in on. They've been focusing in on the Horizon series more, which I think makes more sense if you're gonna be putting it on console, because the people that play sim racers generally have sim racing setups, and they're gonna play better, more dialed in versions of those, right? Like iRacing, for instance. Or F1 or like Dirt, like a very simulation heavy game, which is like Forza. While it is simulation, it's not on the level of those. So
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's been a blast, and I think I mentioned it previously, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, that I really want to play that new Bond game, 007 First Light. I am right on the verge of picking that one up, but I think I might wait. I might wait for it to go on sale. Even though the reviews are stellar for this game, so I'm a little bit like, sometimes the new game comes out and I just really want to get it, and that's one that's just sitting there like begging me to spend some money.
So the Bond games are weird because, like, what do I want out of a Bond game? I
I've
kind of
heard
want to
this
tie
one.
in with a movie.
This one is like, they say, like, every review from a regular person to like a professional reviewer has said this game perfectly marries like what you love about like stealth games, as well as like games like Uncharted. It gives you everything that you love about like what you would be as Bond, as well as the performances from the actors and the storytelling. As far as the story, they're like, this game is worthy of being a movie in and of itself. First Light, it's like a movie experience, but yet you're playing Bond. So
Yeah, I'll reserve judgment, I guess, until I play it. But like, with the Hitman series out there, for instance, and Metal Gear Solid, Tomb Raider, Uncharted, that kind of
there's a-
gameplay, where does it fit in? So if the acting and the story is really good, maybe that will carry it to make it different enough. Because like
yeah,
Hitman is phenomenal. So if I want to
that's
play like a spy stealth game, I'd
it's gonna be
probably,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
That, I don't know.
Um,
This one, just like they say, the gadgets are really cool. You meet Bond. He's very young in this. It's like first year Bond. So everyone that you're familiar with, all these characters that are in Bond movies, like Q and all these different people are also young. They're all, their careers are just getting started, and so there's a lot of world building there, I guess. And yeah, the marriage of like Hitman and Uncharted is what I hear a lot of people say. It's like equal parts of both of those types of games, with like excellent acting and storytelling. So
it sounds like I'd like it. Knowing how good you are at stealth, you probably will hate it.
yeah, I
But
don't know. Like, I used to play like Splinter Cell, like those are the original run of Splinter Cell games. I love those games, and I'd play them like 100% those games back in like the 360 era.
I'm
But
just kidding. But I will wait to hear your update on that before I dive into it. It sounds awesome, and yeah, I don't know that I'm that into the Bond franchise, man.
that's
Honestly.
fair. And I know a lot of people aren't. It's one of those like, well, I have been kind of checked out from Bond movies, but for some reason this game just like grabbed my attention. I'm like, this looks like it would be a lot of fun. I've seen gameplay. It looks really good. So anyway, I will give you all an update. I'll give you an update, Chris, when and if I do play it in the near future, and or I'll be like, nah, I'm gonna wait for the Black Friday sale in 4 months from now.
The last Bond thing I was into was there was someone who did a passion project of 007 GoldenEye on PC, where they had 16 player server rooms playing the old GoldenEye
Yeah.
as like a PvP, and that was kind of fun. But then they released it on Xbox, and it was just not that at all. I don't even think you could do player versus player in that game, which is like the reason you'd want to play 007 GoldenEye.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I remember liking some of those PS2 games. I don't know. Well, I'll give it a shot. I do love myself a good stealth as a huge Metal Gear Solid and Hitman fan. If you say it's good, I probably will give it a try, regardless of the franchise it's tied into. I just never have gotten super into the Bond flicks. I mean, the classics, obviously, I've seen, but it's just not the idea of Bond. I think I'm more of a Mission Possible guy.
And this is the first
Honestly,
outing for the what Amazon bought the property that is 007. So this is kind of like Amazon's first outing with Bond, even though it's not a movie. But everyone seems to think it's really good. And I guess the actor that's in the character of Bond is the same guy that was playing the young Dexter on like the young Dexter. I forget the prequel series that was that single season. I forget what it's called. Dexter First Blood, I think. Anyway, that actor,
yeah,
and I thought he was pretty good in that role. So and then from watching just clips, because I haven't played this game yet, clips of him, I'm like, I didn't even recognize him in the role, but seems to be killing it in this role.
yeah, I have not watched any of the Dexter series. That's something I need to get on. I've heard it's good, but I don't have any. I don't know that actor. I do know that they're casting for the new Bond flick, and there's been like names like Austin
Right?
Butler thrown out there. So that's always exciting when they're like, "Hey, we're casting the new Bond movie." You're like, "Who are they going to pick?" Because it is kind of this big deal of whoever lands Bond, because they're going to be like in 3 or
A
4
10-year.
movies, right?
Yeah, 10-year run. And it's sort of like they become part of it's sort of like becoming the president. It's like only a few people get to ever experience that. And so it's sort of a prestige thing.
I enjoyed those Daniel Craig flicks. I seen 2 of them. I enjoyed them for the most part. But like I said, I just don't have the affinity for. I'd rather play Metal Gear Solid and be like Metal Gear.
Solid Snake.
Kept you
Fair
waiting,
enough.
huh?
I guess we are probably should get to it though with this.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about here. We'll start with Act 1. The fall of the world. This is the outbreak, the collapse, the spread of a disease known as Captain Trips, a military cover-up, paranoia, the escape from civilization, and the beginning of the dreams that start pulling survivors towards either Mother Abigail or Randall Flagg. What those mean, we'll get into as we dive through this. Before we get to that, little background on the novel here. The Stand was heavily inspired by several different sources. Pandemic fears during the Cold War, post-apocalyptic fiction like Earth Abides, the idea of good versus evil played on an American scale, America's version of good versus evil, and King's fascination with societal collapse and ordinary people under pressure. King once described the book as his attempt at writing the American version of The Lord of the Rings, which is a wild take. How do you feel about some of these, Chris? Some of these different sources that have been cited over the years?
Certainly, I see that background, the book of Revelation. Certainly I can see that, just the full collapse of the world, and then the rise of what you could call an antichrist, and all of those things. Obviously, this novel was written 30, 40 years before, this COVID outbreak. So I know that this novel got popular even more so again during the COVID era. So that was interesting because I remember, I think I reread the book during COVID. Why? I don't know. I guess I'm just one of those people where I'm like, I need to know how this goes again while we're living through this. And there's so many parallels. King's just like, he's a master at, like, even though obviously the world didn't end, there's a lot of parallels there, to a real pandemic. There's a lot of those fears and a little bit of that breakdown of society. But yeah, I think this obviously is, one of Stephen King's greatest, works, just not just because it's a massive tome, but also just like for the level of storytelling, so many incredibly well written characters and just a massive world, and the way that they're all sort of drawn together from different parts of the country. And it's just really, really well done. I think it took him like 5 years to write this, which is exceptionally long for Stephen King, especially.
Yeah, and when he says the American version of Lord of the Rings, the first thing I think is it the sheer amount of fucking characters in this thing? Because Jesus Christ, every time I've tried to read Lord of the Rings, I have to get a notepad out and be like, okay,
there's a lot of moving parts. There's a journey. There's the battle of good versus evil. Certainly not a. I mean, there's a group, but it's not a. We're gonna take this thing and we got to get to this place and then we're gonna end it, But it's still very. I don't know. It's trying to think of the word to describe it in one word. There is a word that you could just say this. I mean, the epic scale of this story. It's very sort of a classic story. The bones of the story are something that you've seen in other tales, but it's told in such a way.
You gotta love the hubris, though, right? Like it's the American version of Lord of the Rings. That's what I was attempting to write, anyways.
Right.
Anyways, let's get into some of these characters because we're gonna have to do a character breakdown on this particular story. We don't do these for all of these. A lot of times we can give you a brief idea of who these characters are. They're talked about in detail, but with this going over 3 parts, I thought it was kind of imperative, especially because a lot of these chapters in Act 1 are broken down by character.
Yeah, so you're following these different people and getting to know them, and then you move on and you're learning about somebody else, and they're in a different part of the country.
So if people hate the character breakdown, sorry. I don't know of a better way to do this. If you have a better way of doing this, let me know. If you're looking for a deeper dive, something that I listened to, which I thought was really great, on Stephen King Book Club on YouTube, there is Stephen King's The Stand Horror History of the Superflu, and it is a college breakdown of The Stand in full. It's like 5 or 6 parts. But it is a college course going over The Stand. So this has hit college classrooms, apparently. I think it was like Literature 105. Yeah, History 105, A Chronicle of The Stand. You could search that and that'll come up as well. But yeah, this is a big one. This is going to be the most complicated one we've tackled here on Bachman. So let us know if we do good. If we do piss poor, let us know. We'll try better. Let's start it out. We'll talk about Stu Redman. Stu Redman, I think I would consider the main protagonist of the story, kind of the biggest character. Just a quiet, intelligent man from Arnett, Texas. So I read his character with Texas accent, not like, not all right, but standard Southern Texas accent. Stu becomes one of the first known immune survivors after encountering Charles Campone, is how I read this.
I think it's Campion. That's okay.
So I was reading Italian. Campone.
I've read it, but I also on this pass through of the story when I did the unabridged reading of it, and that's in every spoken place where I've heard the name. It's Campion, I think.
Okay, we'll go with Campion. I read it through this pass. Tried to listen to it. The Internet Archive version was not great. Had to truck through it in a PDF format. So I was going with Campone, which is similar. So we'll Campion. We'll go with Campion. Calm under pressure and deeply observant Stu Redman. He slowly grows into a leadership role throughout this novel, and we'll dig into that a little bit. That takes us to our next character, Frannie Goldsmith. She's a young woman from surprise, Maine, who discovers she is pregnant shortly before the collapse of civilization. Frannie is kind of an emotional representation of endurance and hope and a desire for humanity to keep going on in this very collapsing society. Larry Underwood He's a musician writing the success of one hit song, which I is it called Can You Dig Your Man?
Baby, can you dig your man?
Maybe Can You Dig Your Man? Which when I was rereading this, I immediately thought of I Want to Lick You Sexy for whatever reason from Semi Pro. I want to
Yeah,
lick you sexy.
it's
Larry
similar.
begins this, yeah, so yeah, like he didn't actually write this song, you know. Anyways, Larry kind of begins the story as being very selfish and very immature. And we'll go through his arc, but he kind of becomes a better person, right? Like he gets over himself a little bit.
There's a change, but it's long and not without lots of heartache and struggle. So yeah, we'll certainly learn more about these characters. We're sort of just laying out a few of the main ones that we're gonna learn about, especially in Act 1.
Yeah. Nick Andros, right? Nick Andros?
Andros, however you say it.
Andros. He is a deaf mute drifter who communicates through writing. This is very much a Stephen King character. There was a character similar to this in Langoliers, which if you guys are constant listeners to our show, we went over the Langoliers. King likes these kind of characters. He kind of quickly emerges as one of the moral compasses of the story and one of the most compassionate of a cast of characters we're throwing out here, name-wise.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's one of my favorite characters, if not maybe my favorite. It's between Nick and Larry for me, as far as just like characters that I just enjoy their story and like sort of what happens to them. I care the most, I don't know, about them. I really like Frannie and Stu as well, but Nick and Larry, I don't know, they're just interesting characters that the story that you get in this book for each of them is you just don't expect, where they're coming from very different places, each one of these guys. But
yeah, I would tend to agree with you as far as favorite characters throughout the novel, and their stories I think are some of my favorite. The overall arc, I guess, of the characters I enjoy the most. Yeah, so then the big two here, and I'm not going to say why they're the big two, but I think you'll be able to figure it out by their representation. Randall Flagg, that is a name that has been brought up here on the show before. The Dark Man, Dark Man X.
The Dark Man, the Walking Dude. Yeah, this he's got a lot of names in the story, but
maybe the Man in Black.
Definitely.
Flagg represents chaos, cruelty, manipulation, and destruction. And very soon throughout the story, survivors begin dreaming about him long before they meet Darkman. I'm going to cast him as DMX the entire time. Every time I talk about Randall Flagg, like, hey, yo. That brings us to Mother Abigail, which is the yin to his yang, I guess. Spiritual counterbalance to Flagg. Survivors dream of an elderly woman living on a Nebraska farm, representing compassion, guidance, and hope. And that is our big characters for Act 1. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone. I think that will get us into the story. Chris, if I missed anyone, please let me know.
I mean, there are other characters. Those are the most important characters in Act 1. Absolutely. I think those are enough for us to get to, kind of talking about how this Act 1 unfolds.
So Act 1, I titled as The Fall of Civilization. Opening, Campion escapes. The novel opens at Project Blue, which is a secret military base research facility. I think it's in California. I want to say it's in California, right?
Yeah, I think it's like towards like, Southern California, like San Diego or something.
Which, like, why would you not just pick like Arizona or something? But anyways, California. There's a weaponized strain of influenza that escapes containment after a catastrophic system failure and a if I'm not mistaken, a soldier takes it out of this place, right?
Correct. Charles Campion, he's working inside of a room where he's basically a guy that's monitoring what's going on. He's there to just watch as these people, and somebody drops a vial, whatever it is. He has just a split second. This is like the opening of the novel. A split second, like within 20 seconds, there's some sort of delay that is the only reason he gets out before that door shuts forever and locks everyone in there, and would prevent this entire thing from happening. But he manages to see the alert and just runs out the door before it closes, and get his family together. And he's like, we need to get out of here right now. He's like, you need to pack up. We need to get the baby. We need to get on the road. So that's sort of the opening. It's the opening act of the story.
So he unknowingly, he thinks it's a clean escape. Obviously not. He carries this virus into the outside world. Eventually lands near Arnett, Texas, where Stu Redman and his friends encounter him. But by then, the virus it's already out there. It's too late, right?
Right. He rolls in like wife's already dead, baby's dead. He's almost dead. The way, it's like the car's rolling in, and they're like, he's not stopping, and it's a gas station. He's gonna roll, and they're like, turn off the pumps, and he just sort of like the car just like would have just possibly, caused an explosion because he just wrecks into these pumps. But
he cruises in a Mack truck with a giant green gun. No, I'm kidding.
Probably just a station wagon, whatever. But
couldn't you imagine though? Mack truck with a Green Goblin on the front. I don't know, this book will. No, I'm kidding. This book is great. I'm just making jokes. Captain Trips. That is the name of this super flu, officially called Project Blue 106. It becomes known as Captain Trips. The disease, it spreads rapidly and carries an almost total fatality rate. The symptoms include fever, coughing, respiratory collapse, and hemorrhaging. Very familiar for us living in 2026.
Right. We just kind of went through something like that recently. But
where people don't actually know how it started and where it came from, and some bad,
right?
Government.
It's also very likely that the pandemic we just went through was somebody made a mistake and a thing got out of a lab that shouldn't have. That's more than likely, if you're paying attention, that's likely what happened. But who knows? I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist or anything here. But
we just know it's scary. We don't know how it started, which is exactly the majority of these characters, because they don't have an idea of how this really started.
There's lots of names for this flu, though, too. They, super flu, Captain Trips. There's another term that they refer to it, which is tube neck, which will, become more clear as to why they call it that as we learn more about, the symptoms. But essentially, people just can't get over the flu. It continually mutates. So as you get better, then you think you're getting over it, and then it just mutates and you get sick again until your immune system finally just can't deal with it and you die. But your neck swells up. Most people's necks swell up and turn black. So,
and I do love that it would have been really easy to go zombie here as a writer, right? Like
absolutely.
It would have been very easy to be like, well, let's do Night of the Living Dead. Didn't go that route. I like the idea of it actually being a pandemic. I think that makes it more scary. It's definitely scarier now reading it for me in 2026 than it was the first time I read it back in. We were scared of terrorists back when I was reading this, when I was in high school. So very different tale for me reading it the second time.
It's, it's eerily similar to, to the real life pandemics that have happened throughout history. Obviously, COVID having just happened. If you read this book, you're going to just see a lot of parallels there. King really did his research on pandemics, I think, and thought about the way this would all happen if it were to happen. And it sure seems like, it's a much more extreme virus than COVID was, at least for the majority of humanity, where this is like 99.8% fatal. Most of the entirety of the world just dies within weeks. So that is sort of what's happening here in this Act 1 is the collapse of the entire world. And of course, that didn't happen to us. We wouldn't be having this podcast if it did. But obviously, a lot of people faced a lot of incredibly difficult things. So, not to dismiss how bad, the real life pandemic was for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that coming out of this, if you ever got COVID or had a family member that passed away from COVID, which unfortunately I did, it's much scarier, like the story itself, because like what could come next, like the hint of virus stuff that we're hearing about from the cruise ship. It's like, oh, okay, that's that's crazy.
We're all on high alert now these days, like, oh, this type of thing really happens. It'd been long enough, since the last major pandemic of 1918 was the Spanish flu. Almost 100 years, a little over 100 years since the last time we'd had a major pandemic. But hopefully we don't get another worldwide pandemic in our lifetime.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, if that could not happen. And if drug companies would care more about keeping people safe and less about profit, that's a whole different podcast there, buddy. Anyways, let's get into this. Yeah, I guess one of the scariest aspects of Captain Trips, as we were kind of alluding to, is how ordinary it feels at first. Like you got a cold, and then most people just get sick and then die, right? Like you get a little better and then really, really bad.
It varies by person, and King does a great job throughout this, first act of giving us lots of examples of people that are like sick, and then they're getting better, and then they're worse, and then I think we're going to talk about it. Just there's so many different examples of this, like that. The one that comes to mind is that family that's on their vacation, and it's like the way he describes it, they're on their way home from like Disney World or wherever they went, and then it's like 2 days before they get home, and they're at a hotel on their way home, and it's like the dad's like, why, the son starts having flu symptoms, and he's all, why couldn't he just make it home before he got sick? This would have been a perfect vacation. And then, of course, none of them make it home alive. They all end up dying, within the next 3 days.
Yeah, it gets really, really wild with some of the details that go in, especially with some of the minor characters. And I will say, constant listeners out there, if you did go back and read Night Surf after we talked about Night Surf, you have a prelude to this. This goes into way more detail about Captain Trips and what it does to people and what it actually is than Night Surf. Night Surf is kind of it's a little weird thing, but like I wanted to bring it up.
Story,
yeah, because we definitely were like, if you take this out of context and say you never have read The Stand, Night Surf is not very good. I think we both kind of tried to rate it that way. But as we go through this, and I started jogging my brain, I was like, Night Surf's actually pretty great. Like,
Night Surf would, I think, would have worked with this. I was gonna say it would have worked so much better as like a chapter, or like just a 30-page piece of The Stand instead of as a separate short story. But it's a fine short story. It's just it would have worked better in this story as a whole.
And I think that's why we gave it our lowest score of anything we've done, honestly. But if it was just part of the story, you'd be like, it's kind of cool. let's get into it. Let's keep digging here. We got Stu Redman in the quarantine. Stu and everyone exposed to Campion or Campion. God, I want to call it Campone. I've seen that name spelled. I haven't this Campone, but we'll go
Potato,
Campion.
potato. You can call it what you want.
Are detained by government officials. Everyone except for Stu Redman dies. He is then transferred between quarantine facilities while military officers desperately attempt to understand why he is immune to this disease. Why is he not dying? Why is he the only one? These sequences become increasingly paranoid, claustrophobic, and they emphasize like government secrecy of what's going on, institutional collapse because these people are also dying, and then fear of replacing morality, like people caring about others, and then this kind of loss of public trust in the government and what that actually equates to. Thoughts about Stu Redman in the quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of boils down to, right before he ends up making his great escape from that quarantine facility. And the way that, that King tells it, where there's that man, that the big shot, the guy that's kind of running this whole thing, that he's on the phone and he sends this guy in to kill Stu because they don't want to accept, they don't want anyone to know that they caused this and that they couldn't fix it, and better to kill this man than to have a distrust in the government, when in all reality I think that all of these public officials knew that it's the end. Like, there's not going to be a society, like, in all, someone in their right mind would have just been like, you might as well just let him out. He's one of the very few people that are going to live through this. Give him his shot. He's one of the very, very, I don't know if you want to call it lucky, but certainly lucky in that he isn't dying from this, horrendous disease.
But also potential cure, right? Like that's
Right.
something
They couldn't figure out how to replicate his immunity, and so they just decided that they were going to send a man in to kill him instead of just letting him walk out of there, which is wild. But that is pretty believable when you understand, most governments. It's not uniquely an American thing. I think most governments would just go, well, too much.
he's an X-Man, so let's murder him.
Yeah.
And then Stu goes snick and murders. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't. Wolverine.
But he manages to get the best of this guy who's coming to kill him, and kind of turn the table on him, and manages to get out of the facility. And it's one of those, like, the way it's written, and it's just very harrowing and just big stakes. It's like you feel the weight of everything that's happening in the story. I really like, a lot of people, I think, sometimes get bored with the exceptionally wordy nature of Stephen King's storytelling in these larger novels like this one. But I really like it because it just feels like you're in this world, and like all the detail and everything. This is one, I'll be honest, is one of my favorite of his books. It's not my number one, but it's right up there for me.
I think this escape for me is right up there with the escape from one of my other favorite writers, Richard Bachman. And The Running Man. You remember the escape in The Running Man, and
Yes.
the way it's detailed out and the way it's laid out. I'm like, this is phenomenal. So if you read The Running Man, constant listeners out there, and have not read this sequence of The Stand, I think it's beautifully done. It is cool. You could see it as an action movie in your head of like how he's got to get out of this place. And I like that they talk about the weakness of everyone's sick, right? So that's how he can get the jump on some of these people. And
because these guys, in all reality, he would never, get out of there. But thankfully, he had a one up on these guys, because he's not he's not at all sick. So
that takes us kind of the next part of Act One, which is kind of the spread of the super flu or the spread of Captain Trips, whatever we're going to call it. And he tracks this through gas stations, hospitals, highways, radio stations, military bases, small towns, urban centers, and society, civilization in general. It kind of collapses in these stages, which he goes into detail about. Like there's a denial of it being a thing, which we've been there.
Yeah.
Panic, overall exhaustion of what's happening, and then just utter silence that no one's talking about it. Everyone's dying.
Interesting. Like I was saying, that story of the family on their road trip, that's just one of a bunch of one-off sort of King allowing us to observe characters that are not in the story, but okay, here's what's happening all these different places. It's happening everywhere, all over the world. But I mean, this story only focuses on America. But that, that is certainly, it's interesting because you get to just see from patient zero, and then just get to see all these vectors, as that just spreads out like crazy, exactly how a virus would in real life. Which certainly makes for great storytelling, also very unsettling as we continually think back to something that the entire world just lived through. But this I was really this is what I think maybe my third time reading this book, and I'm always amazed at like the level of detail. There's all the things that he was thinking as he wrote this. He was like, people are going to wonder X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to give them everything that they want from a story like this. All of the thoughts that you have about, well, I wonder what happened over here. Well, you certainly hear about it in this novel.
And that leads us to Nick landing up in Arkansas in a town of Shoyo.
Shoyo. I think it's
Shoyo. Yeah, there you go. Get it out. I'm sorry. I'm still not the 100% of Shoyo. No, Shoyo. Already vulnerable and isolated. He becomes a victim of violence from just assholes, just being mean to, which checks out Arkansas. I've been to Arkansas. It's terrible. If you live in Pine Bluff or Little Rock, I apologize, but the terrible towns. He's taken in by Sheriff John Baker, one of the first genuinely compassionate authority figures that we run into in this novel, who actually kind of cares about this guy. And as Captain Trips, or the super flu, or whatever we want to call it, spreads through this town, fear and paranoia kind of destroy the social order of what's going on. And Nick is witnessing how fragile civilization is. And that's kind of his story throughout this section. And once people stop believing that there could be a tomorrow or another day, like I'm not going to live tomorrow, so who cares, and what's going to happen. So he's kind of seeing the collapse, right?
In a sort of a small scale, in a small town, this, what would, by most people's standards today, wouldn't be a bustling city to begin with, but certainly you're used to seeing cars moving up and down this one road town, and all of a sudden, it's more like a ghost town, by the time that Nick eventually has to leave the town because, no one's left. But
it's kind of a great way to tell this tale from the small town point of view of, like, if it's that bad here, how bad is it everywhere else of a small town? You know what I mean? I think that was kind of brilliant storytelling.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how you had Nick gets beat up by these town bullies, and then he ends up getting picked up by the cops, and then turns out that I think it's the cop's wife's like brother-in-law or something like that. It's such a small town that everyone's connected, but the cop is like, when Nick finally is able to explain to him, I'm a deaf mute, but and he's like, "Can you tell me who did this to you?" And then he explains it to him, and yeah, it's just like, it's classic small town, the story that unfolds there. And then yeah, watching Nick go through making friends with this, like you were saying, this local sheriff who sadly, dies. He and his wife show so much compassion to Nick, and then they sadly die, and Nick gives them, a burial, just because he loves and respects them so much. They actually get their, that respect before he makes his way out of town.
It's like immediately Nick is one of the best characters in this entire book off of this sequence alone. He's just like, you're like, man, this is my guy. That's how I felt this entire sequence.
Nick is just like so cool. When you think about like somebody like this in the world, you're just like, what a hardship it would be to be deaf and mute, and then to overcome all of these things, that he ends up overcoming, and the way that his personality is, his character in the story is just, it's so, I don't know, it's crazy how relatable he is, but yet also he's like you've already stated, sort of the moral center or moral compass of this entire story. Maybe it's the way that we all wish that we were,
right,
or see ourselves. But yeah, certainly a very likable character.
Yeah, I think he's my favorite character. Let's continue forward though, and because we'll get to talk about him a lot more.
But before, just to make sure, because I'm following along with you in this, that we didn't miss Larry Underwood in New York, because we didn't talk about that.
Did I miss Larry? I may have. Let's talk about Larry in New York, which is also great. I'll let you. Yeah. No, I did. Hold on. I'll go. I got my notes here. I did skip Larry, so apologies here. I'm on the tussin, brother.
This is well, Larry, of course. He ends up in New York because he's been like riding on the coattails of the success of his one song that's all of a sudden it's going crazy right before the collapse. Also, I felt like I could relate to that a little bit, being a musician myself. Just like you finally get your big break, and like, he's sadly squandering it, with drugs and having a party in LA. And then that sort of like he has all these people that are, not really his friends, that are just there for the party. And then he realizes he's in debt because he's just let it go on too long. So he has to get out of town and get back to where he's from. And that's where he ends up back in New York. And this is where,
yeah, his entire chapter is him depicting the death of New York, basically, just slowly transforming into a graveyard around him, people dying in apartments, taxis, stores, stairwells, while collapses, just like infrastructures, buildings collapse around him.
One of my favorite visuals in the entire novel is Larry sitting in the New York Zoo and looking at the animals that haven't died yet. And for some reason, it's just, I don't know, it's such a poignant sort of microcosm of what's going on the bigger scale, it's like,
it's all just very
rats in a cage.
Yeah, because like you realize you're also just an animal to some extent as well. Like the way it's written is beautiful. I think this, going back and reading this again, it would shift my top 10 list that we did. Well, let's get into his relationship with Rita Blakemore. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, but it's basically they're both trying to emotionally survive and get out physically.
Basically, we have a lot of storytelling that we're not going to just go into all the details. This is a novel worth your time. But the collapse of everything from the view of somebody who's in New York City, which has just got to be staggering to see, like that many millions of people just die, and know that it's just everywhere you look, and in behind every door, millions are just dead all around you. But Larry's just sitting outside on a park bench, just sort of like, like, I guess like anybody in this situation, what are you supposed to do? But you just sort of like have to accept it, and you're just trying to deal with, like, all right, well, I don't know what comes next, so I'm just going to go out. I'm going to sit with myself for a while and try to imagine what's going to come next. And then he runs into this a woman who's in her, like, probably in her mid to later 50s, who's like obviously from a totally different, walk of life than himself. She was like married to some, rich guy, and just used to like having everybody take care of everything around her. And, she's basically just kind of one of those women that's just like, I worry about the clothes that I wear and the jewelry and, and my little dog, I guess sort of almost a cliche of that upper class New York older woman. But Larry and Rita cross paths. He ends up taking her sort of under his wing, I guess, or they become sort of an emotional support for each other. And he's like, well, we're going to need to get out of New York and kind of get away from all of this. We're going to end up getting sick if we stay here because there's so many bodies. So they make their way out of New York together, and through what's the tunnel? Is it the George Washington tunnel? I don't know.
Well, there's the George Washington Bridge, and there's Lincoln Tunnel, right?
Lincoln Tunnel. That's what it is. I've never been to New York, so I'm a West Coast guy here that I would love to get over to the East Coast and check these things out. But yeah, so the Lincoln Tunnel, which I think is like 3 miles long, and imagine that just stuffed with just thousands and thousands of people that then have died, and there's no lights, and you got to make your way through that. That just, yeah, it was very, very unnerving. It's haunting. It's a great, I think, sort of like, borders on horror. Obviously there's a lot of horror in this, but it's more like believable horror, there's certainly elements of the supernatural as we go along here, but for the most part, there doesn't even need to be that, for this story. Most of the horror is just in the reality of what these people are living through. But making his way through the tunnel, he and Rita had essentially had a little falling out right before they get to the tunnel. And Larry, like, he has sort of come to understand about himself. His mom has told him before she died, she's like, you are just missing something. You're not a nice guy, Larry. You're always going to take care of yourself. And so he sort of like at that point realizes that his mom's probably right. And Rita sort of abandons him because he yells at her and scares her. And then he can't find her. So he's like, well, I guess I'm going to got to keep going. So I don't know where she went. She's off on her own, I guess. And then he ends up halfway through this tunnel and he's like stumbling over corpses. And then he hears something in the dark and he doesn't have a light. So he's just using the wall to make his way through this tunnel. And he hears something like steps behind him. And it's like kind of like it's classic horror where he does have a gun. Everybody in this story eventually, it's like the first thing that everybody's like, I need a gun. It's like, you think a flashlight would probably be on that list too. But anyhow, so he thinks that I can't remember what he thinks is there, but he starts shooting. He thinks it's maybe some other survivor, somebody who's coming to kill him
or rob him.
Yeah. And starts shooting, and thankfully doesn't end up killing that thing that's coming his way, because it's Rita. So she manages to survive him shooting wildly into this darkness of the tunnel. They end up catching up with each other and make their way out to the other side of the tunnel, and get on their way, find a motorcycle and start riding and getting supplies and things. And yeah, I don't know where to stop. I guess that's fine, because that gets them out of New York City. And then
it's kind of these are kind of hard to talk about in each individual thing without going into the full story.
So many details. And
they're great stories.
Your synopsis of things is great, with the way you're breaking these things down into more general.
I just got to keep it. I'm trying to keep it tight.
Right. Yeah. There's really no way to, without generalizing, we could end up doing a 14-hour podcast, on this novel. So apologies if we leave a lot of things out, a lot of details, because there are so many great details in the story that we're just going to kind of cherry pick some things for you guys. But I mean, if you just want to experience something that is grand and epic in scope, this is certainly one of those novels.
It's definitely very much grandiose. For sure. And well worth a read. Your brain is way better at remembering all of the details than mine, trucking through this and writing all these notes. But yeah, I don't know, man. There's something really cool about getting on a motorcycle with a girl you almost shot. He's a cool character.
He ain't no nice guy.
He ain't no nice guy. He ain't necessarily a bad guy. He's a guy. It's a fun character.
I really enjoy his character because of the arc of Larry, and how I liked him from the get-go, but obviously he's a very selfish, character at the onset. But at the same time, it's like, I think that anyone that's honest with themselves can probably understand, at least at some point in your life, you've been that person where you're just looking out for yourself. You got to get through life. We all got to get through life. And sometimes he's not a bad guy, but he also makes bad decisions. And then sometimes
it was also he goes through the realization that everything that he thought was important isn't important through everything that happens in this world, right? Like in this Stephen King designed universe that's going on. Like, your song means nothing anymore.
Right? And then he's embarrassed. Like, he doesn't even want people to know. Like, he's not ever going to talk about it again after the collapse of society. Like, as we will, find out, people here and there, as music gets talked about and somebody mentions his song, and he just sort of just doesn't even, he's like, oh yeah, I'm the guy that wrote that. He doesn't at all. Like, he completely dismisses that was a thing.
It becomes so not, the things that you think are important become not, which is what makes his art kind of fun, because he's kind of a selfish person and comes to semi-success, and then indulges in all these things that you do as kind of being a selfish person. And then even on the way out of the tunnel, he's being selfish.
Absolutely.
Right.
That
so
carries...
his art changes as the story goes along and everything else happens, and he realizes, like, all of the shit that I was concerned with or cared about, not really important in the grand scheme of things, of like love, life, survival. It's not important.
Right. Well, absolutely. Yeah. So he and Rita make it a little bit further, just to kind of so that people who haven't read this but maybe want a little bit of the story. Rita is an older woman.
Give him let's not give him make him read.
Okay. Rita,
if y'all want to hear the rest of the story,
Rita is is not in the story for the rest of the story, but at some point we lose Rita, and you'll need to read the story to understand how that happens. But it's also an important moment for our boy here, Larry, to grow as a character, and that's, I think, one of those touch points in the story where he ends up having to reevaluate who he is as an individual and make those changes.
Yeah, I refuse to give everyone spoilers on this. If I had to read the whole thing,
You two
and you're
are
and
going.
you're listening to this the first time, you're at least gonna have to do a Google search to figure out Nick and Rita. Let's talk about the government collapse. We're gonna keep this simple. As the outbreak spreads globally, federal authority begins panicking and just interrogating and just blowing up. Essentially, they have no idea what to do. King is heavily focusing on misinformation by news outlets, etc. Military overreach, what they think they can accomplish, which they can't, because this is a disease, not something you can attack or shoot. Media manipulation, public panic, people in these cities, and collapsing infrastructure, as we talked about before. Authorities attempt to, set up quarantines, roadblocks, but the disease it's just spreading absolutely too quickly, too rapidly. And one of the novels, and I have this in my notes, most terrifying ideas is that the institutions continue to pretend that they're functioning well long after any control that they have has vanished, right? Like they continue to give this idea of like, everything's all right, everything's going to be okay, we got this
Get
under
back in your
control.
house, stay in your house, everything's going to be fine, when it's already like, well past that. Like, you're either going to die or you're not. And that's just how it's going to be. Like, there's no getting over. If you get sick with this flu, you're done. If you manage to be immune to it, well, you're one of the very few, the 1% of the world that goes on to what we will find out in Act 2, what happens to those people.
And that takes us to, well, I guess the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2, right? Which is the No Great Loss chapters, where
Right.
King introduces survivors who avoid Captain Trips but die shortly afterwards due to accidents, suicide, untreated illnesses, violence, and panic-driven mistakes. We get a lot of characters that die here.
Right.
And, the message is pretty fucking brutal. Like, surviving the plague doesn't guarantee survival. If you're a Walking Dead fan, you know well of this, right? Like, if you have watched any kind of apocalyptic thing where it's like, oh, they're survivors, well, it's like sometimes
Sometimes it's only the beginning.
Yeah, sometimes the survivors are actually worse than the thing itself, as far as the things that they're willing to do to stay alive, or what they believe they're going to do. We'll take it back to Lord of the Flies, right? Like, put in that situation, how people's minds work. And that takes us kind of into Frannie's story.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, this again, like, we've learned about Nick, we've learned about Larry, and we've learned about Stu. And then, we've already learned a little bit at this point about Frannie, but then you come back to Frannie, and of course her story of, being just essentially, she's recently graduated from high school, within a year of having graduated from high school. Right. And her high school sweetheart, she finds out she's pregnant. There's obviously some family tension. Her dad loves her very much and is very understanding of who she is. Her mom is, for lack of a better, just a real bitch of a woman.
Yeah,
I really
she's
hate Fran's mom.
Yeah, Fran's mom is really she is usually the dad character in the situation that Frannie finds herself in coming out of high school and being pregnant, but this is from a mother point of view, and she is awful.
Yeah, she's just like Franny can do no right. That's sort of whereas like from her dad's perspective, he's like, we were all young once, and you know what? You make your mistakes, but you learn from them, and I love you, and you're gonna get through this. We're gonna get through this, and just like very like matter of fact. He doesn't overreact, like a very good parent. He's like, this is something that you're gonna get through. We're gonna get through this together. Just being a good dad. And so obviously she has a much better relationship with her dad.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that he chose to go the route of having the better relationship with the father, considering the circumstances, than the mother in the story for Stephen King. And this is another one that I don't want to get too into detail with because I think the story is so great.
Right.
I feel like her relationship with her father becomes one of the more human and absolutely heartbreaking elements in Act 1. So y'all gonna have to read a little bit. Sorry.
Right. I mean, spoiler, everyone dies except for Franny in that town. Franny and the next character we're going to talk about, which is we haven't really brought him up because he's a character that's the absolutely imperative to the story, but also is sort of discussed very late in Act 1. Harold Lauder.
Before we get to that, let's talk about a little bit about as the civilization is collapsing, we start getting a little bit of the supernatural, right? We start getting the survivors dreaming about these two opposing figures, Randall Flagg being one of them as the man in dark, and I can't think of a name.
Mother Abigail.
Mother Abigail. There you go. Doing too much. Oops.
Sitting on her porch with her guitar out in what is that? Where's
Nebraska.
her home? Nebraska.
That's good. She's out in Nebraska, which, by the way, that seems like where she can be somewhere like the Redwood Forest, or I don't know, somewhere in Japan.
I guess King needed it to be somewhere between the East Coast and where we end up, closer to the West Coast.
I don't know if you've ever been in Nebraska. It's very flat. There's lots of cornfields. There's a whole nother Stephen King story about places like Nebraska.
Children of the corn.
Randall Flagg's dreams, the people that get Randall Flagg's dreams, they're filled with darkness, fire, violence, lots of wolves tearing people apart in fear. And then Mother Abigail's playing in Nebraska. She's just hippieing it out. And it's like Woodstock over there.
Well, it's a I don't know. I know that we're going to get a lot more information on both of these in the following episodes, especially in Act 2 is where we learn so much more about Randall Flagg and Mother Abigail. So we won't go too much into who they are since we'll save that for next week. But yes, the characters start having these dreams, and it seems to be unbeknownst to everyone, since everyone hasn't found each other yet. Everyone's having these dreams. All these survivors are having the same sort of dreams. And they come to find out, as they sort of connect with each other and start talking.
Common King theme. We watched Storm of the Century, right? The linking of dreams. Definitely happens in that as well. Like where all their dreams are linked. The children, for instance, they all dream of the children flying with their Randall Flagg character in that book. Not Randall Flagg, as far as I know, but a demonic presence that is taking a child. It's a cool piece of writing. It's always interesting when you have that. I always like when we're talking about Mother Abigail's dreams. I was like, what if they all went to that revival tent and she's actually the big giant ant? Kidding. That's out there for people who've been listening to the show for a while. Listen to that revival episode. It's pretty good. All right, let's talk about Harold Lauder.
Yes.
He kind of begins as an awkward and isolated teenager, desperate to be reinvented after the apocalypse. He's like, man, I sucked before. I was kind of a nerd, kind of lame. Now it's my time to be cool, right? Like,
The one thing that he's got going for him is that he's smart, and that he's got the answer to a lot of like, he's smart about solving problems. So like, as just matter of fact, he can solve problems, as he doesn't have to think too much about it. He's like, well, we need X, Y, and Z to do this. So I'll just go over here and do this. He's well educated for such a young man.
He's a nerd.
Reads a lot, yeah. But he's also
he's a nerd that is very upset. He's a nerd that's very upset about his stature in the previous world before this happens.
Absolutely. Like, nobody respects him. Girls are not interested in him. Yeah, he's like you said, he's a nerd. And he's kind of initially sympathetic as a reader, right? You're like, man, that sucks. He's also going through this, but then his bitterness, his jealousy towards others, his resentment of certain culture, like, or cliques, and obsession kind of reveal this like very dark personality. This is again an arc that unfolds in Act 2 and 3. So a kind of a long running arc and a disintegration of self that we're not going to go too much into this week, because his character arc is slow and steady. So
yeah, it's definitely one of the most complex characters in the book, for sure, or the novel, whatever we want to call it. But it goes a long ways. But I remember this character, and on the second read, I'm like, I fucking hate this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's a piece of shit, by the time, if you've read the story, as you would probably agree, he's just like one of those, like, people where you're like, you can see the choice that he could make, and instead he actively chooses not to make certain choices, and he actively goes against, simply because of jealousy or feeling like he's not being included. And it's all just because he's being a baby, about everything, and he's not being logical about how much better his life becomes throughout the Acts 1 and 2. And he should just accept where he ends up, because his life would be absolutely great if he would just not do the things he does. But
yeah, like, well, that goes into Larry, right? Like, Larry's character is kind of the opposite, where he has this realization that none of this shit matters.
Right, that he needs to make a choice to be better.
Harold's character does the opposite. Harold's character is very much Charlie Decker from Rage.
Right. He's just like, well, like, I'm not getting my way, so fuck everyone, sort of without saying anything about, what happens, since that will come later. That's essentially Harold in a nutshell, for sure.
And that takes us to kind of empty America, where King is transforming America itself into this very haunted landscape of silent highways, abandoned gas stations, empty towns, corpse-filled tunnels, darkened cities. The Lincoln Tunnel sequence involving Larry, we talked about, remains one of the novel's most famous scenes due to the claustrophobic dread and the way that he writes it, which I think is beautiful. That's why I didn't want to dive too much into it. Go read it. Go read his entire story with Rita. I think it's phenomenal. If you don't read anything else out of the Act 1, that particular story is great. And then I had a bunch of themes. We've kind of already talked about them, right?
Yeah.
So let's get to your closing thoughts on Act 1.
Right. I mean, Act One is just like it's this big setup. You know, you meet all these characters, and then the stakes couldn't be higher. And now you're like, all right, now where's it going from here? And then that's essentially, you know, where Act One leaves off, is like all these people have survived this unbelievable, you know, horrible situation, and now they've got to figure out what to do next. And so we got Stu on his way, you know, away from the quarantine facility. Frannie and Harold are going to be on the road making their way, along with Nick making his way. So it's, and Larry and Rita. So, you know, got all these different stories of people that are, you know, making their way on the roads of America, that don't know each other, but will eventually cross paths with each other, which I think is just very cool. It's an interesting, you know, it kind of just sets them all up and ready for Act Two.
I agree. Now, I mean, by the conclusion of Act One, we have civilization collapsing. Most of humanity, at least in the United States, as far as we know, is dead. All the survivors are isolated and traumatized. And then we have Randall Flagg gathering followers and Mother Abigail waiting. And the apocalypse itself is kind of the beginning of the story that we're about to get. And yeah, that wraps up Act One of the Stand series here on Bachman's Basement. We got 2 more coming. They're going to be just as heated, just as in-depth, hopefully. Act 2, The Free Zone. That's what I came up with. Chris will maybe have a better title than me. That's going to be Randall Flagg's growing empire, the inevitable collapse between hope and authoritarianism. And yeah, that takes us to the end of the show. Chris, do you have any pleasant goodbyes for the people, your tags, etc.?
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're looking to find me online, Facebook, you can find me, Christopher Clausen, and on Instagram, it's Chris_Clausen82. And yeah, so feel free to reach out and let us know what you think. Give us some feedback. Yeah, certainly follow along with us week to week as we head through all of these Stephen King stories.
And we're not going to give a Bachman score because obviously this is just Act One of a big book. But that takes us to this. Until then, avoid dark highways. Don't trust anyone smiling too much in denim. And as always, long days and pleasant nights from Bachman's Basement.